Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Christian's Colloquy. Thank you for joining me for another interview. As you can see here, I'm not alone. I'm joined by Caleb. Caleb, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So, Caleb, we're going to dive in. And as people can probably see based on the title, we're going to be talking about a mission trip that you just came back from recently. But before we dig into that, I want to first give you an opportunity just to share a bit about who you are so the audience knows who we're talking to here.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Caleb Sadler. I'm currently going into my third year studying computer science at U of T, and I've been helping out with Power to Change, their student ministry at U of T. And through Power to Change, I got connected with this mission trip to Vietnam.
Wonderful. That's very good. And I will just add that Caleb and I know each other quite well. Caleb's dad is the lead pastor at my church, but we've been family friends for a long time. And on top of that, I also have the connection. I went to U of T as well for history, which is slightly less interesting according to most people, but also active there at Power to Change. So a lot of mutual friends. So Archie is someone I look up to, and I know he's active there. And just a lot of wonderful, great people at Power to Change, especially at U of T, doing great and wonderful things on the campus, but also the city at large. And as we're going to hear today, also internationally. So Caleb, why don't we just get right into it? We can keep this relatively brief, but I want to leave you to do most of the talking, most of the sharing, and I will just be here facilitating and making sure I stick to my questions here. So, Caleb, why go on a missions trip?
Yeah, so I think for me, one of the big reasons were just a lot of the different people like encouraging me in that. Like there was a few books I was reading throughout the year, in first year and second year, that it seemed like every book at some point would say you have to go on a mission trip. It's just such an amazing opportunity. You learn so much, you get to do so much, and you get to see so much of God's work there. And there weren't too many students above me that went on mission trips because it was COVID, so they didn't have that kind of influence. But there was a Friday morning prayer that I would go to every week through P2C, and the two students who would lead it were basically in charge of the missions organization at U of T. And so they would always have stories of just their mission trips and just the experiences there. And every prayer meeting, there would be a component of just praying for the world. So it was just when we had the opportunity to apply, it was just such a great opportunity to see like the ways that we've been praying for the world, like we can actually contribute to. So I just thought it was a great opportunity there. And yeah, I think at first it was a bit difficult with COVID. I wasn't sure if I would be able to go. There's some concerns of whether it would actually happen, or whether if I would, if it was a good idea for me to go, like with health concerns. But there was one message sent out saying that like there was no one, there wasn't enough people for Vietnam. So I thought I would just take that step and apply. And it was the first time partnering with Vietnam. So there hasn't been a trip to Vietnam before. So this is like a first time. So I thought it was a great opportunity there. So didn't know if it would happen, but I think the Japan trip, there's a trip to Japan that got canceled. So many people from there migrated to the Vietnam trip. And so that the Vietnam trip was actually able to happen in the end.
Wonderful. That's great, Caleb. And we're grateful. Yeah, with the pandemic, I'm sure there were lots of questions, but glad to see you're back home healthy and that you made it through. So God was truly good in that way. But also it's fantastic to hear that. I remember from my days in P2C, definitely prayer was a big part of what we did as a big group. And I remember specifically praying for missions and just praying for the world to hear the gospel. So as you were explaining it, it really seems like a missions trip was a great way for you to not only express the gospel's concern through prayer, but then to take those prayers and then put it into action and actually do what you're praying about, that the gospel would go to all peoples and nations and be obedient to Christ's command in that sense. So that's truly wonderful. And it's great to hear that the trip was able to happen. So from there, I'm sure there's a lot more that we could say. And if people have questions, I'd encourage them to leave them in the YouTube comments down below. But Caleb, you mentioned this trip was to Vietnam. Why Vietnam? What was the reason for this trip and the context and everything about it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it was a new partnership. So they're kind of just testing the waters to see if this is going to be a long-term partnership.
Mm.
And one of the things that was mentioned in orientation was that Vietnam was a very close country. So it's a communist country, and especially in the north, it is very close to Christianity. And it was only in the past few years that it's starting to open up. And um, there's another trip to Desert Rain, it's called, and it's given a code name so that like the actual location is hidden. And
Right.
if it was, I think it was, if it was like 2 years ago, the trip to Vietnam would have had to have a code name because of how closed it was.
Mm.
So it's just cool to see how open it is now. And um, yeah, so that was one of the major reasons was, yeah, it's like a new partnership. It's opening up. People are like ready to hear the gospel. And especially where we're in the more in the south or around the middle of Vietnam, where like in Ho Chi Minh City, where students were so open to just engage, like even if they clearly knew like all of us are Christians, they were still open to share their thoughts and yeah, hear what we have to say. And yeah.
Oh, that's great, Caleb. And as you're saying that, I remember a friend of mine during my time at U of T went on the Operation, I think, Desert Rain
Mhm.
missions trip, and that was definitely, he was going to a country, and he said he couldn't share which country. But so it's great to hear that Vietnam has opened up a bit, and that
Mhm.
you were really not capitalizing, but taking this opportunity where the country has opened up a bit. Now let's get in gospel workers, and I think that is a place where you see that, given the closed nature of the country and uh, Christianity not having a long established history there, at least in recent times, in that sense, that this was truly a time to bring the gospel in, and this is a place where foreign workers might be a great boon to the local church there, who is growing and nascent and definitely could use that support. And it's on those lines, I want to ask you that missions trips, they could often go along so many different lines. So you think of some people there, they're going as like experts in certain fields and they're helping do things, or you think of bringing in theological education to train in leaders, or have conversations with certain people that you're better equipped for. What would you say were your objectives as a university group coming from Canada going to Vietnam? What were you guys looking to do on this missions trip?
Yeah, so it was very similar to what we already do like at U of T. So it's primarily like student ministry. So we just want to like build relationships with the local students, whether it be the local like Christian students already involved in their Power to Change, or CCC as they call it, or just the non-Christian students, and just building relationships where you can just talk deeper about life and be able to share the gospel. So that kind of happened in a few ways. So we would go onto campus and just try to talk to students and make friends. And we were told that we aren't allowed to share faith on campus, but to build relationships there, invite them to the events where we can actually share. And so once we build relationships, we would invite them to our English clubs, which we would have weekly.
Mm.
And there we would teach English, but in the later weeks, we would have like questions that were more related to our faith, like how do you deal with stress, or how do you deal with struggles, like questions about family, and just opportunities for us to share and opportunities for us to hear how they experienced life in Vietnam. And yeah, it was just great conversations that we were able to have, especially like after the English club. They had so many great questions that just allowed us to share about the gospel. And we also had picnics each week where the first bit was just to talk and have fun, play games. And near the end, we would use solarium cards, which are basically just pictures that, yeah, you would ask a question and we would get them to point at pictures to kind of describe what they're feeling. And it's
Mm.
just another way for us to just hear how they're thinking about different life questions and for us to share the gospel through it. And so, yeah, a lot of it was just relationship building, and it was awesome to have the local like Christian students help out because they know the culture, and they also, I mean, they know the language, so they could translate for us. And yeah, it was a
Mm.
pretty cool opportunity.
Right, right on. So there's definitely a partnership between you coming in and then those local Christians already there.
Yeah.
So thinking a bit more about that partnership, just a brief follow up. Do you think that was a draw for many of the local non-Christian students there? Like, it was exciting to talk to Canadians and to learn English. Was that the big appeal which got them to perhaps take interest or open up in ways that the local workers there would find difficult?
I think so. And even for the local like Christian students, like some of them weren't coming out to events too much. So it was when they hear like, oh, Christians students from Canada are coming, it was just a opportunity for them to come back and just do ministry together.
Mm.
And also there were multiple students that were talking to my teammates, saying that they're expressing like struggles and things that they wouldn't be able to share with their friends in Vietnam. Like they felt like they could only talk to people like from another country because I guess they know they're going to go back, or they just, it was just an opportunity where like they said that they could only be vulnerable with them, which I guess was another opportunity for us to kind of speak into those like struggles, I guess. Yeah.
Right, Caleb. And I think that's helpful to share. So I know a lot of people, when they think about a missions trip, there's the question of if there's local people there, why do you need to come in? But I think those are practical reasons where uh, someone coming in like yourself for a short amount of time, it brings excitement for the local people there. It brings a sense of, hey, newness where it charges people up. That's a practical reality. But then
Mhm.
like you're sharing with the culture and the people you're trying to reach, where knowing you're there just for a time, it's an opportunity to truly be vulnerable, it sounds like, and not have to worry about something coming out or something exploding or those cultural, perhaps local ramifications, since here you are back in Canada
Mhm.
and they're able to continue with their lives. So maybe I'll just ask another brief follow-up question there in terms of the local workers, how they received you. Was there a sense of when you met them, like, was there a bit of awkwardness, or was there a sense of, hey, we're brothers and sisters working together? What was that dynamic like with the local Christians there?
Yeah, I feel like we became like best friends right away. Like they were right away just sharing their testimonies, and
Mm,
it was just cool to see like, yeah, like we're worshiping the same God halfway across the world. And it was just, yeah, we were able to connect because we have that shared commonality. Like we serve the same God, and like just we hear each other's stories. It was so encouraging. So yeah, it was, I don't think there was any awkwardness. We were able to like get right into the work at hand, I guess.
oh, what a blessing that is. And I'm sure that that was encouraging for both them and you, seeing,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, halfway across the world worshiping the same God. And though there's a different language, there's also that shared biblical kind of language which comes out in testimonies and
Mhm.
reflection, and I'm sure prayer. So that's beautiful to hear about. So Caleb, just transitioning now, you got a bit into the blessings of your time there, but let's just open up the can of worms. It's a missions trip. There are going to be difficulties and hardships. So, could you share about what were some of the challenges that you faced on this trip?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we went onto campus to try to make friends, and there was a lot of, I guess, like rejection. Like you go up to people and like either they don't speak English or they're not really interested. Just like any ministry, there's going to be rejection, and that's kind of tough to do, especially because the campuses are so small. Like by the second week, we've been there like 7 or 8 times. They probably know like you're not a student. They can kind of tell like they've probably seen you before, and it gets kind of tough. But
Mm,
um, we made it through. And I guess the language barrier also is a tough thing where a lot of students that we did interact with knew English quite well, but there were some students where that was like a struggle, where like just communicating like hobbies was kind of like the level that you could get to. It was hard to get to deeper conversation, but I think that's where the local students helped out so much, because they could share their testimonies in Vietnamese. They could share about the gospel in Vietnamese, and so it wasn't like all up to us. We still had them to help when we couldn't have that like language communication there. So I think those are the biggest struggles. And um, I think the biggest like blessings throughout the trip was just, yeah, encouragement from like the local Christian students, just the passion they have to make his name known, and seeing people come to faith. That was an amazing opportunity. And um, yeah, especially like the final goodbye. Just we had one day where pretty much everyone we knew we got to meet throughout the trip was able to come and just hang out and say goodbye. That was such an awesome opportunity, I think. Yeah.
that's wonderful. And thank you for sharing that, Caleb. And thinking about the challenges, I could definitely understand how that might be difficult once the people get to know you and hear what you're about. There must be that feeling of they already made up their mind,
Mhm.
or this and that. But as you were sharing the blessings of the Spirit of God is at work, and people do come to faith as He wills. So, and it's great to see that. What an encouragement that must have been. And then knowing that people are having those conversations, which they can then continue with the local workers there.
Mhm.
So, just a couple of follow up questions now. In terms of challenges, you mentioned that you couldn't directly share your faith on campus, it sounded like. Was that a rule of the school, or is that just a practical thing where you didn't want to rock the boat too much? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think it was more so on like the PDC side that they decided. So a
Mm,
lot of the rules that we make, it's not for us really. Like if we get kicked out of the country, that's not the worst thing in the world. But it's more so that if we get in trouble and we have a connection to the local ministry, we don't want the local ministry to suffer. So we do want to protect them at all costs because we want the local ministry to thrive in the country. So I think more so on campus, it's just that if they yeah, I think it would be easy. Like I was kicked off just for I think looking like a foreigner like
wow.
once. So, but it wasn't anything like faith related.
Mm,
But I think if we're sharing faith, I think students would probably talk to other people, and we wouldn't be able to continue like building relationships there. So I think it was more so just so that we would be able to continue to come to campus and continue to do ministry there. So I think that was the main reason. Yeah.
right. And I think that's a healthy and I think good restraint to have where you're setting up places where off campus you're making relationships where you can be direct and share your faith, but for the sake of long-term ministry in the context of your trip, but then also all the people who are there, the Vietnamese Christians and their organizations, you're thinking about their reputation, their safety, their longevity, where ultimately it sounds like that's what it's all about. You're not bringing any converts back with you. You're leaving them in the care of the locals there who know the
Mhm.
language, the culture, who have their ministry there. So I think that's very wise, and I'm glad that you were able to share that now.
Mhm.
So, Caleb, just before we get to perhaps closing out here about what you learned and where you growed, maybe this could just be a space of what was your time there like apart from your missionary activities? I'm sure people want to hear that. Were you trying all sorts of new foods? What was going on a Sunday? Would you attend a local church there, or things like that? What you did for fun? Anything you want to share on that end?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we can start with like Sundays. So each week we went to a different church
Mm,
that was recommended by the staff. Or so like the first week we went to a more traditional church. So it was all in Vietnamese, but we had like translation on the side, and we would have songs that were sometimes familiar, sometimes not so familiar, but in
mm,
English and Vietnamese. So that was cool to see. And on the same day we went to a more younger church where a lot of students were at, and it was very lively and just cool to see. I think it was that one was almost fully in English, and
mm.
for the rest of the trip we went to a couple more like international churches, like so English speaking and people from very different backgrounds.
Right.
And yeah, the food was amazing. I've never had Vietnamese food, so that was cool. It was yeah, we got to try so many different Vietnamese dishes, but also um yeah, just different dishes from like around the world, like from Thailand or
Mm,
just different. Yeah, I tried to try as many different foods as I could. We did also go to like KFC, like
right.
American food, but yeah, the food was great. And we every week on Wednesdays we would have a rest day where we'd take a break from ministry. So we would try to just make it a day of like a Sabbath to just rest and spend time with God and just look around the city, just to yeah, to have fun. And on those days we did get to go to different places. I'm just trying to remember. We did get to just walk around the city, find different places to shop at, and the city was it was very interesting. So there was very like many motorcycles that I've never seen before,
Mm.
and so you just have to like walk across the street, hope they don't hit you. It was yeah, it was something.
Yeah, that sounds like something, but it sounds like a great time. So I'm glad that you were able to do all that ministry, but have it sounds like one day a week just to spend time with God and recharge, but then also to see the city and check
Yeah,
out a Vietnamese KFC. Just a brief question: what were they serving the same KFC food there, like same chicken or?
I think KFC was very similar, but McDonald's had fried chicken.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So that's
there's
it. So
slight
you
differences.
hear about that, but
Yeah.
okay, cool. Did you try
Yeah.
McDonald's fried chicken?
I yeah, I think so. I'm not really like a fried chicken connoisseur, so I can't really tell the difference, but it was good.
It was good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. KFC and McDonald's both serve fried chicken in Vietnam, and at McDonald's, it's pretty good. So
Yep.
thanks for sharing that, Caleb. And I want to get to our last main question here. So it's so wonderful to hear that there were challenges that you overcame and you see the blessings. You mentioned people attending events, having conversations, and I
Mhm.
think even one person coming to faith. You mentioned, was that right?
Yeah, I think there were a few people coming to faith, but one that I got to share the gospel with, and I think the Sunday after I left, he said the local students were saying that he came to faith.
Oh, beautiful. So that's wonderful. So you saw some clear blessings and answers to prayer. And it's so wonderful to hear that through your ministry, God brought someone to faith, and where we'll continue to pray for that person, that they invest in the church life there. But
Mhm.
Caleb, just to close out here, what would you say you personally gained from this missions trip experience? How did you perhaps grow, or were stretched, or just saw new things that you think will perhaps change your life or change how you approach ministry in the future?
Yeah, so I think one big one is just confidence and like courage to share my faith. Like just having a month just to dedicate to ministry, like gives it's just an opportunity to see God at work, and that kind of gives you a lot of confidence and courage to go and keep doing it. And another one was just in orientation, and throughout the trip, we had basically our main goal of the trip was to love God, love team, love neighbor. So
Mm.
it was just an emphasis on like, yeah, we want to do ministry, but we want to start with loving God, because we can't love each other if we don't start there. And we can't love the local students if we can't even love our team. So just that priority of just loving in God, loving team, loving neighbor. And I think that's applicable to any ministry at church or PDC
Definitely.
or anywhere in the future. And I think that was a great reminder throughout the trip.
Mm.
And I think especially with that student I got to share the gospel with, it was a great opportunity, but it was amazing to just see the conversation, like where all the opportunities where we were able to share was only because of the questions that he asked. It was just to see the Holy Spirit leading the whole conversation, and just to see how much of ministry is up to God. Even his response, it wasn't, we couldn't have forced him to change his mind. It was because God was at work, and that was cool to see. So just a reminder that it's always God at work, and we just have to be obedient and be serving him. Yeah.
Mm. Caleb, that's beautiful. Gaining that confidence, but that love priority when it comes to ministry, where that I think you're 100% right. Thinking about our local churches as we seek to love our wider community and share the gospel with them. If we are unable to love each other in the local church, we're not setting ourselves up for success. And then think about success itself, as you shared, just embracing the fact that you are called to do a task and you can faithfully do it to your best of your ability, but ultimately resting in God's control and his timing and his work, and
Mhm.
just saying, hey, I can't change someone's heart. That's what God does. I can't raise a person to life. That's what God does. But I can certainly proclaim the truth and also be a good example however I can. So Caleb, that certainly is a lot of lessons you learned, and I'm so grateful you could share them for us now. And there's a lot that we could apply. We didn't go on the missions trip, but we could learn a lot from your experience there. So
Mhm.
Caleb, thank you for sharing all of that. And I want to ask you just a general question. Is there anything else from your trip or the experience that you would like to share, you think might be helpful for us to hear now?
Yeah, I think a lot of the people that came on the trip, I think, had doubts of like, oh, am I really the person that should go? Am I ready? But I think the cool thing was just that anybody willing to go, God can use in just amazing ways. It's not really up to us, it's up to God. So I think anyone who's on the fence should just take that step and yeah, go on a mission trip. It's pretty awesome.
Oh, what? See, that's good, Caleb. So I will put that in another way of saying it, where if anyone watching this was waiting for a sign to go on a trip or
Yeah.
to try something new, or to just put themselves perhaps more generally in a new ministry context where they're worried or wondering, this from Caleb right now officially is your sign to take that step and to do what
Yeah.
Caleb did. Take that step and trust God and to see him work and be faithful in ministry. So Caleb, thank you for sharing everything you shared. That's wonderful. And thank you for just being open about your experience. That is edifying for us to hear, where I think everyone listening to this now is encouraged by your testimony, is encouraged by your work, and will ultimately be praying for all the people who were impacted by the conversations you had and just the events you hosted. And hopefully we'll get invested in that local
Mhm.
church. So I will encourage people here now, praise God for Caleb's ministry and the work of P2C in Vietnam this past month, but also please be praying for the local Christians there as they continue the ministry. They're the people day in, day out who are living the gospel in what sounds like still a difficult context, but also they're
Mhm.
seeking to faithfully proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. And they certainly could use all the prayer, and certainly we could use all the prayer we could get here in Canada and beyond. So Caleb, thank you so much for coming on the channel. It's been a pleasure. And I would encourage people, Caleb is a wonderful man, lots to share. And I'm sure if you leave some questions down below, he would love to share with you as well. So, and if you do have questions for Caleb, I will let him know to make sure he answers. But that's it for now. Caleb, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a great time.
All right, wonderful. Everyone else, thank you. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.